Welcome aboard, Bulla The Rainbow Man recording. Okay, we're going to discuss the rainbows today, see if we can't explain a few extra things about it that people have trouble getting their head around. So I start off with, let's start off with, in the next 60 seconds, the next 1 minute, how many rainbows do you think there's going to be? Well, if we were counting white rainbows, it's going to be 500 in the next 60 seconds occur across the lit side of Earth. So that's 500 events of all different sizes, big ones, small ones, some as big as your head. But out of that 500, perhaps only 30 to 50 will be what they call red rainbows. Now, this is where people get a bit confused. I'm going to explain it so that you get it clear what is a red rainbow and what is a white rainbow. Now, this data and documentation can be found in the Mayan civilization, where they call it red and white rainbows. Now, all rainbows are born white. When they say white, they're transparent, they're invisible, but they call them a white rainbow. Okay, but they're actually invisible because they're made out of pure light. It's a pure light projection. And contrary to what science would have us believe, that the rainbow is a reflection through the clouds, directly from the sun's light through the clouds causes a rainbow, that is not correct. That has been found to be flawed. It's not correct. All rainbows, white or red, are projected from the ground, from an event that occurs on the surface of the Earth, not only on the land, but also on the oceans. Now, I've said that all rainbows are born white. So what changes a white rainbow to a red rainbow? Well, the simple answer to that question is clouds. Meaning, if there is no clouds overhead, so you've got a blue sky above your head, and this event occurs, and a white rainbow goes up, well, it goes all the way to the ionosphere. Nothing to stop it. But if there happens to be clouds over the top of this projected light, then that light hits the cloud and stops. The cloud is like a blanket over the top of the light projection and stops that light getting to the ionosphere. Now, that's when you see the Roijibiv. The Roijibiv being the 7 colours of the rainbow. That's the actual light penetrating the cloud and slowing down through its 7 stages of its speeds. It's 7 speeds of light refractory. Gives you the 7 different colours of light. And the last colour is when the light goes stationary. It stops. That's it. That's as far as it goes. It doesn't go through the cloud and continue on. It stops there. So that's what's known as a red rainbow. That's the coloured rainbow, the Roijibiv, the coloured one. But they all start off white from the ground, and if there's clouds over the top, well, you're going to get the rainbow picture, the Roijibiv. But if there is no clouds over the top, that same projection goes all the way to the ionosphere. Now, it's the white one without clouds. That's the most important one, and that's the one I'm going to talk about now. And I'm going to explain as I go through some of the places where these rainbows occur, but I want to get it straight that this is a generated light beam, and it's generated from the ground, and it needs mist, being hydro H2O at atomic 6. It needs mist upon the ground anywhere, somewhere, whether that be at a waterfall, or whether that be a fog, or some mist, or a sea fog, or just a fog down your valley, or if you've got a river running down your valley and it's got some rocks there that make bubbles and that makes mist, that's where you're going to find your rainbows. Okay, so here we've got this rainbow wave projects up into space, right? There's no clouds over the top, so this is what we call a white rainbow. It's got no clouds over it, so it's going to go all the way to the ionosphere. Now, when this light projection comes out, because it's pure light, it's pure electromagnetics. And the strange thing is that the north and the south pole, the magnetic north and the magnetic south, they polarize this light and hold it in a flat shape, being stretched north and south. So when this wave goes up, it's stretched out to the north and it's stretched out to the south all the way to the horizon on both directions. And it's a thin sheet. It's only thin. It's a thin sheet of light. It can be anything from a 0.5 millimeter thick that you'll find in your litmus test that I've put on the thread. You'll find it there. That's 0.5 millimeter. But in a 60-mile wide sea fog, that same light refraction can be 10 meters thick, albeit it is still polarized into the north-south direction, all the way to the horizon and further out into space. Now, that being the case, given the sun is in the east, then when that light projection goes up as a big sheet, it looks like a peacock's tail. But it's like a big fan, if you like, facing north-south. So therefore, it's broadside to the sunrise. Okay? So it's sideways to the sun coming up. Now, given that's a fixed sheet of light projecting up to the ionosphere, and when one adds the rotation of Earth, because we are rotating around at 27,366 miles per minute, so is that light beam going around, because it's like a big flagpole sticking up in the sky, and it's being swept, but it's being swept into the oncoming sun's rays. Now, that speed I just gave you, that's on the ground speed at the equator. But if you extend that up to the ionosphere, the tip of where this light beam is, it's in the ionosphere, then that speed that light beam is going at is many times the speed of light. And that is being smashed into the oncoming sun's rays, which is coming our way at 300 k's per second. So now we have two opposing light forms that are colliding with each other. Now, it's during this collision, the forces are so great and the speeds are so high that we get what's called photon splitting, fusion, cold fusion, light fusion, where we split the photon, not the atom. We're not splitting the atom, we're actually splitting the photon. We're actually splitting the photon. So, as it does this, of course, this light beam that's going up from Earth, it just acts like a massive conduit. And this fusion that happens up in the ionosphere, that's what's making the ionosphere, is this collision. That's what's actually making our ionosphere. That's what's generating the ionosphere, is these rainbow waves that are going up all the time, these white rainbow waves. That is what's generating the ionosphere. Now, what it does, it enters the light beam all the way back down to the very creek or the sea level or wherever that light beam's being generated. That power comes down. It's called pranic energy, cold fusion power. And it's a supermagnetics. And that supermagnetics discharges into the ground, and it causes what's called a plume or a hotspot, a magnetic plume or a magnetic hotspot. Now, if you were to go onto NASA's Magneto satellite, you can actually see these plumes being generated. You can see a time lapse where you'll see across the entire world, but only on the lit side of Earth, only on the lit side of Earth will you see this, because you can't have any plumes on the dark side being manufactured anyway, or generated, because there's no rainbows on the dark side of Earth. The only place the rainbows are is on the lit side of Earth all the time. That's just continually on the lit side. There is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rainbows being made, white ones and red ones, and they've been made for billions of years. Okay, so you can see this on the NASA satellite where they show the plumes on Earth, magnetic plumes. And one day there won't be a plume there, and the next day there will be. And then a week or so later, that plume will disappear. Now, science would have you believe, and I'll tell you straight to your face, that they don't know what makes those plumes or magnetic hotspots. Not even the senior professors of physics can tell you where those plumes and hotspots come from, or indeed why they dissipate and where they go. And I'm telling you that those hotspots and plumes are made by the white rainbow. And the only reason that they dissipate is they've generated and dissipate by causing rain. So now if you correlate the NASA maps, the Magneto satellite maps, and you correlate those plumes, those magnetic hotspots, and then you superimpose the latest weather data and cloud mass maps over the top of that magnetic map as a sepia, or a sepia map, where you can see the both through each map, then you will notice that above that red plume that's marked on the Earth, you will see a weather pattern and a low pressure cell develop. Now, don't ask me why science hasn't twigged to this. I don't know. I can't explain that, why they can't see this. But this is a pure fact. You see the NASA Magneto satellite map, and then you check the weather map over the top, and you've got to do this over a couple of weeks, and you'll see that over every magnetic plume that appears on the Magneto map, you'll notice that a low pressure cell forms over that plume, and then it starts raining. And once you get the cloud mass, the low pressure cell, the low barometric pressure, because with high magnetics and a high magnetic plume, you get a low pressure cell, a weather cell, a storm cell. Okay? And that's where you get your red rainbow. Now, what does the red rainbow do then? If the white ones are making these plumes by going up into the ionosphere and bringing charge back down to Earth and making a plume, well, that plume is actually generating Earth's specific gravity. That's what gives us our gravity. This is where Earth gets its gravity from. It's from all the rainbows. So, okay. So, the white rainbows make a hotspot or a plume. And the red one, that's when the clouds are over. Now, that's a negative rainbow, and that decays the plume. So you get a white one that generates the power, causes a hotspot on Earth. That hotspot causes a pressure cell, a barometric low pressure cell. It draws the weather, draws the clouds, it sucks all the clouds out of the upper level atmosphere and draws the clouds from all the way around, from thousands of miles around it. It'll draw the clouds above to that barometric low. And then, after it's rained for some period of time, And when the cloud stretches right across the sky, you'll see it's like cloudy all the way across the sky and it's raining. But if you get a sunrise or a sunset where there's just enough room for that sun to peek through and make another rainbow event, another white rainbow, if that white rainbow goes up and hits the bottom of the clouds and causes a roijivid, which is your coloured rainbow, that's the end of the event, because that's a discharge rainbow. And that's what makes the plume decay. And that's the day you'll see on the NASA's, that's the day you'll see on the NASA map where that hotspot and plume disappears. That means the day that that hotspot disappears off the NASA map, that's the day you've had a coloured rainbow. So that explains your white and your red rainbows. So the white rainbow is on a clear sky day when there's no clouds in the air, and that rainbow wave goes all the way to the ionosphere, causes a fusion and split photonics to occur in a collision with the oncoming sun's rays. That power is discharged into the ground, causes a plume hotspot. That hotspot draws the weather, causes a low pressure cell, causes it to rain, and then at a later date, say some weeks later, can even be a month later, when the sun can just peep through on the horizon under the cloud at dawn or at sunset, that sun can just peep in and makes another rainbow, another white rainbow, that goes up and hits the clouds, and that sends the whole system into decay. And that's the end of your rain event, until you get another white rainbow. Now, in my time over the years, I've actually hunted for these particular rainbows where they occur, because there's many places where these generators regularly occur. And I've got these documented where they occur. And I know when they go off because I can see the hotspot on NASA, on NASA's magnetosphere satellite mapping. So if I see a big hotspot occur on that map, I can then log that, and I can then forecast the weather that's coming ahead, because I know once I've seen that big hotspot appear on NASA's map, I know before too long there's going to be a big weather cell develop over that hotspot. So now it depends how big this hotspot is. Now let me explain this. Depending on the size of the mist, now our biggest rainbows, they come from the ocean. We get them on land as well. We get smaller ones up valleys and from waterfalls and stuff like that. But they are just small fry compared to the ones in the ocean. Because if you've got a mist, a big sea fog, and it's let's say for instance, say 40 miles across. Well, when the sun strikes that mist and makes this generator, then the size of that rainbow is massive, absolutely massive. Well, when that goes up to the sky, up to the ionosphere, if it's a clear overhead, when that goes up and starts to hit the sun's rays, causes such a massive plume, well, that's what causes your La and El Nina. And if it happens 2 or 3 days in a row, like if that fog stays there, and it happens 2 or 3 days in a row, that event can actually change the entire southern or northern hemisphere's weather pattern. It's that powerful. It can take you from summer to winter, if you like. It can be, that's how big they can be. It can actually change the entire hemisphere's weather pattern. It depends how big it is. So I also track these through satellite, because I know that these sea fogs, they occur when you get a glass out. That's when the ocean goes flat. It's completely becalmed. And you can actually see this from the satellite. So when you get a huge big glass out, you know that old Mother Nature is going to start some convection happening. And the mist convexes out of the ocean. Now, I've been in the ocean in a boat, in a glass out, while this has actually been taking place. I've actually visualised. It's not something you can't see. You can see it coming out of the surface of the ocean by looking over the edge of the boat. You can actually stand there and watch the mist coming out of the ocean's water, the surface, through the surface tension. Now, when it comes out, when that mist convexes out of the ocean, that's pure water. It doesn't bring any salt with it. It leaves the salt behind in the ocean. So the mist is pure water. So if you put a piece of plastic or Glad wrap over it, you would finish up with drinkable water. It would condense on the top of the plastic. I think there's a couple of survival kits where they give you put a bit of seawater in a plastic bag, and then you let the sun strike it and the water condenses inside, and that's drinkable water because it's fresh water. So, okay. And that mist is also our cloud mass. That's our cloud mass. All these sea fogs, when they warm up, they evaporate up into the atmosphere, and that forms our cloud mass. And I've also got to tell you that science would have you believe that they don't know where the clouds come from either. They don't understand this convexing of the ocean, apparently. Anyway, but that's where the cloud mass comes from. Okay. So the rainbows are completely heteros or heterodynamic. Now that's a word that Bulla has coined, heterodynamic. That's a new word. Meaning the rainbows can be negative or positive, but they can occur at any size. So you could have a tiny little trickle of water, just a little bit more than a few drops, falling over a little crevice on a rock somewhere, and just when the drips fall down, they make a little bit of mist. The sun strikes it, you'll get a tiny little rainbow. You can get a tiny little rainbow. You'll get a tiny little rainbow. And yet the same mist can make a 60-mile wide rainbow. That means they're fully ambidextrous. They can occur at any size. As long as the sun can strike a bit of mist, you can make a rainbow. And that's doing that 24/7. It never stops. By now, we've had several thousand white rainbows. In the time I've been speaking, we've had several thousand white rainbows go up into space. And they're there on a continual basis. It's a continuum. And it's been a continuum for billions of years. It's been there ever since we've had H2O on Earth, ever since we've had water, and it's been able to convex into mists since whenever we've had, how long it is, whatever it is, back to when we first started to get mists on Earth, we've had rainbows. Okay? And it's been non-stop. It has never stopped. That's what Nostradamus shows in the rose picture. He's showing you the non-stop continuum of the rainbow waves. But it's represented in the rose picture. Okay. So now we move on a bit. Now I've explained the white rainbow and the red rainbow, and I've explained the hot plumes. I've explained where you can find that on NASA, and I've showed you how to overlay the weather. And so if you see a big red plume, you watch that and see the weather develop around it. If you see a really large one develop, get ready because it's going to rain. Now, I've also got to explain, if that hotspot is in the Northern Hemisphere, that weather belongs to the Northern Hemisphere. And and all the magnetics that come from that hotspot all go to the North Pole. And any hotspot that happens in the Southern Hemisphere, all that magnetics goes through the grids and goes to the South Pole. Now, as we speak, the Antarctica, the South Pole, is actually enlarging in size and thickness. It's getting bigger. Why is this so? Conversely, when we look at the Arctic in the Northern Hemisphere, it's melting and it's getting smaller and it's declining. So therefore, that tells you that there is a problem somewhere in the ground grid magnetics where it's not getting the full charge. The Northern Hemisphere is not getting its full charge of power, because you can tell just by looking at the Arctic, it's melting. It's no longer generating its ice. It's not getting bigger, it's getting smaller. Where the Southern Hemisphere is healthy in magnetic wise, that's why the Antarctic is getting larger, why it's getting thicker and bigger. Okay, so then we go looking for a reason. Why is this so? Why is this so that the Arctic is melting? What's happened? What has happened that's made this Arctic melt this way? Well, my figures tell me, and I look at a specific date, 1986. That's when I first observed the Arctic and its melt. That's when it began. Now, conversely, this particular date happens to fit with the Exxon Valdez. Okay, so we go looking for the reason why the Arctic has shut down. 1986, Exxon Valdez, Prince William Sound, a massive oil spill, and a liberal amount of dispersants were used. Now, when I researched this, I quickly discovered that on the atomic level, when you spill oil and you add dispersants, you turn the ocean into a soluble oil, albeit a dilute one, but still soluble oil. Now, this soluble oil, once you've turned the water into soluble oil, it doesn't penetrate to the great depths of the ocean. It stays on a couple of 100 millimeters of water, just 200 millimeters, let's say just 200 millimeters of depth of water, because it is soluble oil, so oil floats on water. So this oil film is in the 200 millimeter top of the ocean surface. Now, depending how much you've spilt and how much dispersant you put on it, to how far this thing will spread on the surface, albeit sight unseen, because it's very hard to see this. Once they've put the dispersant on it, it's very hard to tell the difference between the shine on the water, whether that's an oil shine or just a mirror shine. It's hard to tell the difference. But Mother Nature can tell the difference, because what happens is this. When you get the glass out and the ocean goes like a mirror surface, that's the time when Mother Nature tries to convex her mists, being hydro, H2O at atomic 6. Now, that means the weight of that mist is on the atomic scale of 6, right? That's its weight. And that's why it floats in air. So your mist floats in air. So that's equivalent to, if it floats in our atmosphere, that's equivalent to our gravity. So it can float in our gravity pressure, okay? Now, when Mother Nature tries to convex this mist out the ocean, what happens is this. The oil, the soluble oil and dispersements, the oil and dispersements, they convex to the surface before the hydro does. And then the oil reconstitutes back to a micronized film on the surface of that ocean. Now that stops any hydro getting through. In other words, imagine a huge sheet of glad wrap across the top of the ocean. Well, you stop it breathing. It can't breathe. It can't convex. Next thing you know, it's got no oxygen level left in it. Next thing you know, you got your fish dying. You got your whales dying. You got your porpoises and dolphins dying. Right? Because what's happening, that doesn't allow the mist to convex, and then that doesn't allow the sun to strike that mist and make rainbows, to give you a hot spot, to power up the magnetic grids. So that's where the secret is. That's what's turning the rainbows off. It's killing the rainbows. The oil and dispersant is killing the rainbows. And it's been doing that since 1986 in one of the biggest rainbow making areas in Alaska, which is Prince William Sound, which is almost always glassed out and always making mists. Well, now it doesn't. It doesn't make the same mists as it did prior 1986 because there's still oil film coming out. The 9% oil that's left in the beach sands, every time the tide comes in and goes out, makes more oil film. Now, Prince William Sound's been making oil films since 1986, and they've been flushed out into the ocean. And that's killing all the mist, which is killing all the rainbows, killing the magnetic grids. So therefore, that's when your Arctic started to melt, because it's not getting the power charge that it needs. Now, over and above this data, which I had worked out, then we get the Gulf, which is 10 times bigger than Prince William Sound. Now, I'm going to say this loud and clear. This oil and dispersant is going to perhaps spread right throughout the Northern Hemisphere. And if it does, and it shuts all the rainbows off, and we don't get any power into the Northern Hemisphere's grids and get that Arctic freezing again, then you are going to suffer an increase in bigger earthquakes, more volcanoes, more wild weather like you've never experienced in all your life. Because once you shut the power grid off, then everything is going to want to expand because there's no gravity to hold it in place. So your ocean's going to want to expand, your ground's going to want to expand, the core, the molten core is going to want to expand, therefore you're going to get volcanoes, and if you get a volcano going off, then they're going to spew out toxic fumes, which is going to go up into the sky, and any rainbows that you are getting from the land, say from freshwater lakes and so forth, that's just keeping your engine idling, it's going to knock them out as well. Because the ash will do the same as what the cloud does. It'll stop the rainbows getting to the ionosphere to get their power. So this all boils back to magnetic power. And of course, everything I'm saying here is not understood by the scientific fraternity. They just don't want to go there. Out of the 600,000 climatologists that are now on the planet, not one of them relate our specific gravity to the production of rainbows. Well, that is going to change because we have to get our head around this factor. Otherwise, we're going to have a problem. Well, we'll show you at the end of this bit of a talk here. We've got a small clip to show you. And then after that little clip, we'll have some questions. So if anyone's got some questions you want to ask, go right ahead. Quite happy to answer any question that you may have about what I'm saying. I'm quite happy to answer them, as I have just about all the T's and I's crossed as far as rainbows are concerned. So this is the major problem we have. So we've got the Gulf spreading, the Gulf oil spill spreading around, It's probably not only in the Gulf now, it's probably spread elsewhere. Now, I don't have any data as to how much oil dispersant, or how much solubility would actually stop the rainbows occurring, like would stop the mist convexing. But I have done a little bit of research on an Olympic pool, on an Olympic-sized swimming pool. If you put 1 drop of baby oil in that Olympic pool and give it several days to spread, then you won't get mist coming out of the Olympic pool. So that'll give you some idea of how toxic this oil in the oceans is. It's extremely toxic. Matter of fact, it's so toxic, it could switch off the whole Northern Hemisphere's magnetics. And that's what I think is happening at the moment. I think we're getting a magnetic decline in the Northern Hemisphere. Southern Hemisphere is pumping away madly. At this time, we don't have a problem in the Southern Hemisphere. That can be seen by the enlarging of the Antarctica region. It's growing in size. And the reason it's growing in size is because the Northern Hemisphere is in a decline. And the threshold, which should be on the equator, has now moved northbound. So that is moving the power band of weather, which, if you've ever taken the time to see, I'm intending to put a sequence of vids on my thread to show you this power band of weather making, which occurs at the threshold. That's where all the cyclones occur. That's where all the hurricanes begin their lives, is on the threshold, on the equator. And that can be clearly seen if one goes to cyclone or hurricane tracking. You can see them occurring. And that just so happens to be, if one checks the latest series of earthquakes, you'll see that power band has now moved northbound. And all the earthquakes, if you look in general, you'll see there's more earthquakes occurring in what they call the Ring of Fire, I suppose. Some people call it the Ring of Fire. Some scientists call it the Ring of Fire. That's where the power band has moved to. And if this problem continues, then I can see a magnetic eclipse coming. Not a pole shift. This is not a pole shift that we're about to incur. This is a magnetic eclipse. It's where the planet is going to finish up with one magnetic pole only. And what I'd like to also point out, if the rainbows are being killed off, then you don't get white rainbows that go up into the ionosphere. So if you're not getting any rainbows going up in the ionosphere, then you're not getting any ionosphere either. It's stopped generating as well, because they're both locked together, because it's the rainbow that's generated on the surface of the planet, either on the land or the ocean, that goes up, grinds away up there in the ionosphere, and actually generates the supermagnetics that generates our protective fields. So if you stop the rainbow down the bottom by killing it with oil, killing the mist, you've killed the rainbow, red and white, well then correspondingly you're going to finish up with no ionosphere either. So therefore, that's why NASA is now saying there's a problem in the ionosphere. It's collapsing. Well, if that ionosphere keeps collapsing, then that's going to let all the serious gamma rays and all the ongoing rays from the sun actually penetrate the atmosphere, but only in the Northern Hemisphere. Because the Southern Hemisphere, there's nothing wrong with the ionosphere. And if you check NASA's data, you'll see that what I'm saying is correct. You'll see that there's only a problem in the Northern Hemisphere, not in the Southern Hemisphere. Okay, but that doesn't let us off the hook here in the Southern Hemisphere. Because if anything, when this happens to you, we are going to go into a super ice age. You're going to see Alice Springs in the centre of Australian desert freeze over. That's what's going to happen when we have this magnetic eclipse, because all the power is going to be generated from one pole, being the South Pole. So hopefully the South Pole or the Southern Hemisphere can generate enough power to keep you covered in the Northern Hemisphere. That's my hopes. That's my hopes. The other thing I'm hoping to get done is, given this data and given science looks seriously at this data, then there is the opportunity to actually artificially generate some rainbows to put the ionosphere back, artificially. Okay, so the ocean's dead. Okay, so the ocean is dying. It's not generating rainbows. So, okay, we have the opportunity and we have the schematics and the data to be able to build some rainbows on the land around, say, freshwater dams or lakes. We could actually introduce some rainbows artificially made that can actually put the power back in the grid, and also at the same time reinstall the ionosphere. Now we can do this. This is why I have brought all this research out, and I've started all the way back. I've started all the way back from the ancients and explained the pyramids to you. I explained that Horus was making the rain in the promised land by using the rainbows. He was making rainbows. There is some 300 pyramids in the Northern Hemisphere that at some stage were perhaps used at another time when this planet, maybe 10,000 years ago, was in the same trouble we are today, and maybe, just maybe, all those pyramids were being used to generate artificial magnetics to hold the planet steady so the planet didn't go into convulsions. Because, trust me, if this continues, if we let this go, if we keep ignoring this, if we keep our head in the sand and don't come to grips with this problem, we're going to have some major events that we're not going to have control over. And once it gets to that point, this is a climate train. It's only going in one direction. It's on a set of rails for decline. And it's an atomic chain reaction let loose in the ocean that started this climate train. And the climate train is building and building speed. It's going faster and faster and faster. It's dragging the timeline with it. It's depleting the gravity. It's a runaway climate train. Now, we've got a window of opportunity here, a small window, albeit it's a small window. I can see a set of points up ahead where we might be able to derail this climate train. But we've got to get our head around some of this data. That's the important thing, because old Bulla can't do this on his own. I'm only one man. I've got a couple of crew around me, and we're working as hard as we can to show and try and produce this data so you can see, so the scientists can see, so everyone is on the same page, so we can get to and do something. I'm not a doomsdayer. I'm out to fix this problem. That's Bulla's job. I want to fix the problem. But I need everyone listening to this conversation to start asking these scientific people, what the hell is going on? Why aren't we doing something? Is there something we can do? Look at this Bulla's data. Is he right or is he wrong? Can you prove what he says is wrong? Well, if you can prove what I say is wrong, show me you can prove it wrong. But if you can't, let's get our heads together. Let's get on and let's get something done here and hold this planet. Put the ionosphere back. Let's regenerate the gravity. Let's stabilize the place. Because if we don't, you're not going to like what you're going to see. I'll just check my time here. Oh, I've still got 15 minutes to go. Okay. So that's where I'm just going to have a little, let my finger off the button here in case someone wants to say something. Okay, because sometimes I don't read the screen. Okay, so yeah, that's an interesting theory about the pyramids. Given there is so many pyramids, like 300, is 300 or 400 pyramids, and the majority of them are all in the Northern Hemisphere. Well, why would that be? Why wouldn't, if pyramids was a local thing to do, why wouldn't there be pyramids all across the Southern Hemisphere as well? Why is there 300 or 400 in the Northern Hemisphere? There are some pyramids in the Southern Hemisphere, but not many. Not compared to the Northern Hemisphere. There is literally hundreds of them. Now, perhaps in a previous time, they were used to make rainbows. And when they did so, they were also made specific gravity, because those pyramids would liven up the magnetic grids, regardless if the ocean was killed off completely. Even if the ocean went completely dead and didn't make another rainbow, mankind is quite capable of generating his own rainbows. Maybe not by using those pyramids. We've got technology today that we could actually do this. A matter of fact, I bring the subject up about the wardrobe door mirrors and burying the temperature gauge underground. Now, there is nothing stopping us making arrays of mirrors. Just mirrors. Maybe 60 wardrobe door mirrors in a like an arc shape, all facing sunrise, and you build it in like a, you make the archway all mirrors. You make it an archway, and you put 60 wardrobe door mirrors on there. You might have to build about 30 of these, put them in strategic parts where we know we've lost our gravity, and then when the sun comes up at dawn, the light will strike the mirrors. It'll send out a fan-shaped light refraction, the same as a rainbow, and interact with the ionosphere the same as a rainbow does. So we don't necessarily have to make rainbows if you don't want to. We could just use mirror arrays. We might need to make 100 of them. However many we need to make, we'll just make what we need. And then that alone would give us enough charge to put back in the grids. And that would, again, reinstall the ionosphere. So you could say it's all done with smoke and mirrors. But there you go. That's a true fact. That's a fact of scientific data there. I do not joke when I'm talking about the mirror frames. That's quite a feasible and possible thing to do. But however, we could make some genuine rainbows on the lakes and different places. We could make some really big ones, in fact. And that would put back the ionosphere. That would then start refreezing. Like if we seen that the Arctic, we could just keep increasing these things until we see that the Arctic begins to refreeze. And of course, this should stabilize the specific gravity and stop all these earthquakes. It'll stop the plates lifting, because that's what's happening in the Northern Hemisphere. Every earthquake in the Northern Hemisphere at the moment, I say, is the Earth coming up and the plates coming up, because the specific gravity is releasing pressure. It's weakening. It's weakening. And that's letting the plates come up. So therefore, you're getting earthquakes. Conversely, the Southern Hemisphere is getting earthquakes too, because we're getting an increase in pressure. So all our earthquakes are pressing downwards. So our plates are trying to push downwards, and your plate in the Northern Hemisphere are trying to come up. So we've got a complete unstable gravity field at present. And it's going to get worse. A lot worse. Because if this oil continues to spread and kill more and more rainbows, then every time it kills a rainbow, that's one less rainbow that's up in the atmosphere making gravity. Eventually, you'll finish up with no gravity in the Northern Hemisphere. Okay, I'll just go over some notes here while I'm talking here, just have a look, see what I've missed out on, in case there's something else I'd like to bring your attention. Okay, we've explained the red and white rainbows. That should be as clear as mud now. As far as I'm concerned, you know what a white rainbow is now, surely. A white rainbow is when there's no clouds overhead. And the red rainbow is when there is clouds over the top, and that's when it stops. That's a negative rainbow, the red rainbow. So that's why the Mayans call it red and white rainbow. And that's why it says in the Rosetta Stone. You care to read the translation of the Rosetta Stone and Horus the Ra God? Horus the Ra God expected to be paid 2 double-sided gold coins to make the snakes to beautify the lands of Horus. In other words, he was making rainbow waves, the light waves, but he wanted 2 double-sided gold coins to do that, because he was using the gold to make things like the golden angels. You know, he needed the gold to make golden angels, to put the Ark of Covenants, the stone, on the golden angel wings. So he was using the gold for other things. I don't think Horus needed money, in fact. I don't think he was short of a bob, old Horus. Okay, so we've covered the red and white rainbows. And we've covered, okay, now, I'll just cover briefly here. This can all be found in ancient history. Now, if you check the ancient indigenous paintings of the rainbows, like in Australia, we have the rainbow dreaming. That's an indigenous painting where they believe the Rainbow Man is Bulla, the maker of all the sky, the maker of the oceans, the maker of the mountains and the rivers. That's Bulla. And when you have it explained to you by a genuine Gitachi man, if you ever get it explained to you, he will use the terms Bulla and the Rainbow Man is fiery white snakes that move like snakes, makes big rainbows in the sky. And what he's talking about is there's a set of waterfalls in the local area that's making mist, and the Aborigines camp there because it's a sacred place, and they actually have seen these light waves, and they've seen the rainbow being made. And that's why they describe it as such. Fiery white snakes that move like snakes make big rainbows in the sky. Well, that's a heterodynamic electromagnetic hydrowave in scientific terms. Now, you'll see the same sort of painting with American Indian painting. You'll see the rainbow painted there with figures standing on the rainbow. That's like people in the rainbow, or the people that come from the rainbow, because I haven't yet touched on the vortex or the doorway that opens within that wave structure, within the wave structure itself that makes a pyramid. Within there, that is the vortex and the doorway to the 4th dimension. That is a vortex, another time frame, another place, another complete invisible planet, if you like. Now, this can also be supported by Higgs. That's Higgs fields or Higgs boson. In his field notes, Higgs makes it very clear that while doing some of his experiments, he says that he was visited by people from another world, from another time spectrum. And that's understandable, because if Higgs was conducting experiments that brought him close to that light frequency, the speed of light that he was using, then that's very possible. That's very possible. That's a whole talk on its own, really. The fourth dimension and the doorway and how it works. That's really a subject that could be spoken about at length on its own, really. So I won't cover it. I won't go into great detail today. Simply to say that one can open that doorway if one chose to. There's a lot of other data about bowls, B-O-W-L-S, bowls. And Nostradamus was using a bowl to contact the fourth dimension. That's where Nostradamus got all his data from. That's where he got all the dates and all the information. He got it from using a bowl. And when you read Nostradamus's data, he explains it very clearly, quite clearly, a couple of times within his documents, that he would take a bowl of steaming water up to the roof of his house and place the bowl on a brass tripod and wet the cuff of his coat and wet the hem of his pants and his feet, and then he'd put a brass wand under the tripod, under the bowl of steaming water. And then he says that from within the mist came a flame, being the flame of Kundalini. That means that he'd struck a rainbow with that bowl of mist. The sun struck the mist, made the waves, and made a rainbow. And that's how Nostradamus connected to the fourth dimension. That's how he did it. And he explains that in his data quite clearly. One can read that a couple of times, in fact. Okay, so now I think it's probably time now to have a look at what I consider is reasonable to assume if we don't do something about this magnetic decline, what we can expect. And what I see is going to happen in not too distant future if we don't get our heads around fixing this problem. Perhaps Doom might like to put a link there, and I think that concludes my bit of a talk for an hour about rainbows. I hope you've enjoyed it. And stay tuned after this little vid only runs for a couple of minutes. We can have a conversation and question hour if you like. I'm quite happy to stay here for as long as you want me to and answer any questions you've got. Okay, thanks for turning up.
Okay, I'm going to stop recording and give you a break for just a second, okay?
Hey, Bulla, if there's a question in the room, because this recording, you know, someone might listen to it later. If there's a question in the room, just repeat the question and then answer it so people know what you're talking about. Thanks, Bulla.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
He wants you to watch this video that they've posted.
I'm going to watch this too, myself.
Okay, well, I'm going to start recording again. Anybody's got any questions? That's a wow video there.
Okay, Bulla's back on the air here. Even sends a chill up my spine watching that movie.
Okay, Dar asked you a question earlier, and I think it's important. And it's up here on the screen. And he asked, is there any way to lessen the effect of the Gulf BP oil spill?
No, we can't stop it. It's too late. Can't be reversed. It's an atomic chain reaction. It's been. Can we fix the ocean? No, we can't. As much as I've tried over the last 7 or 8 years to figure out a way to fix the ocean, no, we can't. It's an atomic chain reaction that's been let loose that cannot be taken back. And it may stay that way for 1,000 years. It could be 1,000 years before that, before nature might be able to repair that problem. That's the way I see the oil in there. And of course, on a daily basis, we're spilling more oil. And if we have more earthquakes and we have a few of these rigs and oil wells go up or go over and that oil starts spilling, well, it's going to get a lot worse, isn't it? Because we're stuck in this chain reaction now where it's going in one direction. It's all part of the climate train now. We're sort of going down this road of devastation and destruction, and the only way we can stop it is stabilize the gravity so we don't get the earthquakes. But if these oil rigs keep spilling oil and these ships keep spilling oil, well, it's just compounding and compounding and compounding and compounding. And now we've got an oil rig spilling oil into the ocean off Scotland. And that's, now we've got England in a drought. You know, England's in a drought, for God's sake. Like this is really happening, folks. We've got to get our head around this. We've got to get moving on this. But to answer the question, no, we can't fix the ocean. It's a lost cause. We've lost it. And it may stay like that for 1,000 years. There's no way to take the oil or get the oil out of the ocean. It's just not possible. So we've got to re-engineer ourselves into artificially making our gravity, or that video is going to become a reality. All right, okay, yeah. Sitting alone at night in a secret study. It is placed on the brass tripod. Slight flame comes out of the emptiness and makes successful that which should not be believed in vain. The wand in the hand is placed in the middle of the tripod legs. With water he sprinkles both the hem of his garment and his foot. A voice fear he trembles in his robes. Divine splendor, the god sits nearby. There you go. There's your rainbow. There's the doorway and the vortex. So that's pretty self-explanatory for those that have never gone down that road or looked at that writing or studied any of Nostradamus. Nostradamus was a wizard in these things, and that's how come he has all the answers. That's why he had Robert Flood, the etching, the rose. Okay, any more questions from anybody? I think most of the people on here have already asked most of the questions that they wanted anyway. But then there could be quite a lot of questions coming from when this is recorded, because there's lots of people I know haven't come because it's not in their time frame or they're doing other things, so they'll get an opportunity to watch the recording, and that should be up on YouTube as well, so they can see it and hear it there again.
Thank you, Bulla. Anybody got any questions?
Okay, so there it is in a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed that little bit of a chat, but it's probably pieced together a lot of the chats that I've had here on Chani Chat. Thanks for the opportunity to record that. That's something for someone to contemplate or other people to contemplate. Thanks very much.